The country is doing well in terms of budget transparency and is now ranked number 3 in Africa after South Africa and Benin.
This, the free talk. Last week, the Minister of Finance presented a midterm budget that many Zimbabweans are grappling to understand its effect on the economy and how it's going to benefit them directly. So we here on this, the Free Talk with me, your host, Dara B, we are going to unpack the midterm budget. We're going to hear from economists, experts who deal in understanding these figures so that we are able to understand how the budget impacts on you personally and on the general economy. Now, this is the Free Talk with me, your host, Dara B, who join us just soon after this break.
I make a sense, Dara, because mari dzavari kutaura kuti wawedzera mapanzwisisa asi kushanda chino because nhasi makwedzera mari rate izvo zviri kubva rakwira mapanzwisisa those guys in fact hatina need yekuwedzera masalaries evanhu chatinoda isusuka kuti rate ringe riri normal.
It won't change anything to Zimbabweans.
The budget should be people oriented, centered on the people. But the problem is budget from Zimbabwe it's centered on the elite, not the poor.
Welcome back to this, the Free Talk with me, host Dara B, and we are discussing the midterm budget that was unveiled by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Mthuli. Now, we went on the streets to hear what the people of Zimbabwe think about the budget. And we are going to, later on in this program, allow you to hear their voices. But mostly, the biggest issue was most people we interviewed at random in the streets say that they did not understand the budget. They did not understand what it stood for, what it meant, and how it will impact their lives. So in studio this evening, I am joined by two economists. I'm joined by Persistence Gwanyanya, an economist and also a member of the Monetary Policy on the RBZ. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on the program, Dara.
We're also joined by a professor, a lecturer in economics, Professor Mganu. Thank you very much, Professor Mganu, for joining us this evening on this, the Free Talk.
My pleasure.
Beautiful. I'll start with you, my brother. Just to, in your introduction, just to unpack what matters about the budget that was unveiled by Mthuli, because some people are saying they don't understand it. So just try and make them understand in a few words.
So what Professor Mthuli announced was the midterm fiscal policy review and a supplementary budget. The midterm supplementary review essentially does what it says. It reviews the progress in the economy in the first half of the year, the budget was in operation, or the fiscal policy was in operation. The supplementary budget was essentially for tabling of the supplementary budget before the parliament for approval. Now, as the budget was set out initially, which is for the full year from January to December 2022, there were projections that were made, there were estimates that were made, and there were assumptions that were made. But what we have seen is that not all projections still hold. There is now need to revise some of the projections. Importantly is the growth projection. The projection for the year was initially at 5.5%, but the ministry had to revise that growth. But as I say that, to 4.6%. But as I talk about the revision of growth, I am naturally inclined to reflect on the message that comes out of that. The key message is, whilst the economy grew last year at 7.8% and was expected to grow, growth was at the expense of stability. So what we have seen is the increased instability in the economy, typified by high levels of inflation and accelerated currency depreciation. Inflation reached, I think, 256% the previous month of July, and which is quite high in terms of even global standards. But look here, this inflation is happening at a time where progress has been made in the real economy. Tangible progress in terms of construction, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of other real achievements in the economy. So which gets us to a point where it is now necessary to balance between growth and stability. So the key message that we drive out of the revision and the progress going forward and the promises of the ministry going forward is that there would be need to balance growth and stability.
Amazing. We'll come and test some of the issues that you raised, but I'll come to you, Professor. Your simple unpacking of the budget to the layman on the street.
So the budget, to me, when the Minister of Finance made that presentation, tells me one story, that we are going to the graves. Why? Because can you imagine a country with, in 4 years, had increased its budget outline from $8.1 billion in 2019 to almost $2 trillion in 2022. It demonstrates to you that the currency, Zimbabwean dollar, is going for burial. Because there's no any explanation which can qualify us having a budget growing from $8.1 billion to $2 trillion. It means that our money is meaningless, because how can you have a budget as a government? In 2021 November, you announce it as $968 billion. 6 months down the line, you double it to 2 trillion, to 1.9 if you like. But you also have a certain provision in the budget. For example, the minimum salary for workers, civil servants, getting 35,000 RTGS, excluding the 175 US dollars. If you want to come down to the basics and say how can a civil servant survive, so you can say that 175 can only pay for 2 rooms for accommodation. Then the 35,000 RTGS, before you take any deduction of statutory obligation, you have to now meet everything there, your food, your education, your health, everything. So the whole country is going to the graves with that budget. It can't be a budget. It's not a proper budget. When you go into detail, just qualify what I'm saying. By mid-year, the Minister of Finance had disbursed 27% of the budget for the Ministry of Health. 27%. Normally, he should have disbursed at least 50%. But if you look at each budget line, so you disbursed 27% of the budget to the health, and we know that the health sector, these are now death traps. There's no medicine, no stationery, no supporting utilities which are required, right, by patients. I'm aware that when mothers who are going to give birth, when they go and register, they are required to buy some specific utilities which are supposed to be provided by the hospital. And the minister is disbursing 27% by mid-year. But when you look at the office of the president and cabinet, by mid-year it had utilized 111% of its budget instead of 50%. Well, that's mid-year. The Ministry of Defense and War Veterans had utilized 75% of their budget, 25% above the expected budget. Ministry of Agriculture had utilized 80% of their budget by mid-year, 30% off the mark. Now, look at these departments and ministries. This is where the political center is. Talking about defense, talking about the OPC, you're talking about agriculture. That is the political cloud which is used to finance agriculture. Now, because of there's political consensus and support by the political powers to live outside their means, the Ministry of Finance also lived outside its means by 25%. They utilized above 75% of the budget by mid-year. So, but then when you look at social ministries' health, they are underperforming. When you look at foreign affairs, they had utilized about 22% of their budget by mid-year. And when you listen and get reports from the foreign embassies about our colleagues who are out there representing us, they are not getting paid for the last 6 months or so. So that is why when you go to the Home Affairs office, you want to get your ID, you can't get it. You want to go and get a passport, you have to pay US dollars, otherwise there's no passport. So this is a budget which is against poor elements. But the major danger of this budget is the fact that they have doubled the budget by mid-year, which is okay from a transparent point of view. And that I should commend the minister for being honest for the first time. Because remember, since he became our Minister of Finance, he never presented a supplementary budget. But you then see when the budget is audited, there's no their excessive expenditure which he was consuming. For example, in 2019, he spent $6.7 billion excessive expenditure. 2020, $102 billion, which was even more than the $63 billion budget expenditure for approved budget expenditure for 2020. He spent 102 excessive expenditure, $102 billion. And we should be ready to also receive the continuation request for 2021. It's obvious. So for me, even if it's okay from a transparent, the major issue where I want to explain, if you give me 1 minute, is the impact of this $1.9 trillion to the ordinary people in the streets. The impact comes on the back of the procurement system of government, where, from my calculations, 36% of that $1.9 trillion is going to salaries of civil servants. 64% is going to capital expenditure, which are the roads, which is talking about as the good things, the dams, And the other part of it is going towards about 30% to other recurrent expenditure. So 64%, which is $1.22 trillion, is going to be paying service providers who will use this money to buy foreign currency on the black market. So the question I want to ask the ordinary Zimbabweans is that if we were struggling with a budget of $968 billion and the rate was running away, what is going to be the effect of the doubled budget now is $1.9 trillion? The answer is obvious. It means we are going to be seeing more trouble, more problems. We are going to see the rate running away in a faster speed, because the challenge with the procurement system of government is that when these guys are paid the money, they use double prices in US dollars because they are trying to bridge the gap between the official rate and the black market rate. They use, in some cases, those who supply services use forward rates, where if the rate is, say, 1:900 against US dollar black market, they can even use 1.8 or $2,000 against $1 US dollar. And in some cases, they are paid in advance. Then they buy foreign currency. Now, the last danger is that Minister of Agriculture is proposing to increase people on household support scheme from 1.8 million households to 3.5 million households. And likewise, if you look at the budget of Minister of Finance, the budget provision for Minister of Agriculture was $134 billion for this year. On the supplementary budget, they have been given an additional $100 billion to support that growth. So the challenge is not on the farmers who are benefiting, but the challenge is with the service providers who are going to be given these tenders to supply. They'll go in the black market. So what Zimbabweans must expect from this budget is that there's not going to be any amount of gold coins which are going to stop this runaway exchange rate. There's not going to be any amount of statutory instruments or any policy measures or a midnight announcement which are going to stop the exchange rate from running away and inflation. And I see it very clearly that we will not exceed October with Zimbabwean dollar in transaction, because these rates are going to be running away in a manner that will be very difficult for anyone to chase them by way of forward pricing.
Now, would you want to have any direct response to some of these warnings that we are getting from Professor Mngani?
So the analysis that Prof is giving simply tell you one thing, that we carry a burden of the past. The mere fact the budget has increased many times to 1.9 trillion this year simply show us that the problem that we confront us as a country are long-term, are permanent, and are structural. They cannot be sorted by budget. They cannot be sorted by short-term policies. They will have to be sorted by structural reforms. Now, we are in a reform period, and it is expected that in this reform period, the characteristics being described of budget are expected, because we are trying to deal with a long-term challenge.
How long is our reform period?
The reform period runs until 2030, which is the Vision 2030. So they started in October 2018 and expected to run until 2030. So the biggest challenge that we have been experiencing as an economy is instability. And instability itself, which has resulted to the shooting up of the numbers is explaining, is linked not only to the budget or of expenditure. No, it is linked to permanent long-term challenges such as unemployment, such as informalization, such as deindustrialization that we went through as a country. So you cannot divorce those permanent challenges from a well-informed view of Zimbabwe's economy today. Zimbabwe's economy today is largely linked to the journey it traveled. So we traveled a journey which got us into hyperinflation, which saw us into currency reforms of different nature. And all those have to be taken into account in explaining why the numbers have overshoot in a short space of time.
Do people want an explanation of why numbers are overshooting, or they want a solution? And the real question here for me is, I want us to take this back. I know you are economists, and your language at times is that deep in terms of economy. But I want us to take it back on the men of the street so that they can connect with that. What is the feasibility of government itself doubling its own budget from 900 billion to 1.9 trillion, or close to 2 trillion, but expects all prices to remain stable, expects school fees not to go up, salaries not to go up, but their budget is going up twofold? What is the logic economically in doing that?
The doubling of the budget essentially reflects the inflation in the economy, the level of inflation. At 256% for the last month, the inflation would have warranted such kind of increase in budget. Your question would be, what are the key drivers of inflation today? And is it something that is going out of hand despite the efforts to reform the economy? And my response to that is, we cannot adequately explain inflation today by just looking at the current budget or the performance of the current economy. It may not make sense to you. That's why it appears it doesn't make sense, because these adversaries are essentially linked to the historical issues, the challenges that we went through as an economy, the structure of the economy. That, for example, let me just give you an example. The high levels of unemployment would dictate that those that are unemployed would want to enterprise around currency. Are you not seeing the youngsters enterprising around currency? So it will be very difficult for any policy to work under such an environment where everyone is trying to enterprise around currency. The informalization of the economy itself would mean that the policy impact is, the effectiveness of the policy is affected by the informalization of the economy. You can increase the interest rate, you can introduce other monetary instruments, but the extent to which they impact those in the informal sector is to an extent limited. So I'm just telling you the environment we are operating in as a country. In that environment, what you would expect is not that the situation has been completely sorted out, but the key question is whether you're doing the right thing or you're going the wrong direction, whether we're in the right direction or not. My answer to that is, I think we have now gotten the basics right as an economy, and we're doing the right thing. Firstly, in rebalancing the economy. This economy, what caused us to be in this position, has always been government over expenditures, typified by the budget deficits in excess of 10% of GDP. Now, we talk about the over expenditure and the need for a supplementary budget. Yes, it was necessary because of the levels of inflation. But I'm not much worried about the supplementary budget. I'm more worried about whether within that supplementary budget or the extent of the final budget, we are still achieving the desired budget deficit, which is within 3% of GDP. So at below that level, it shows me that the government or the treasury is at least observing the basics, is doing the right thing. Though the budget is far way high, and in my view it is far way high because of the reasons I have highlighted to you.
Amazing. Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I think let me try to make it very simple. Because the road we are taking us, I think we will not get a solution. So let me make it very easy, because I know government listen to this program and I would want them to hear what I'm saying. I want to remind my colleague here that when the Minister of Finance was appointed, I think it's in August 2018, annual inflation was 5%. Right? Annual inflation. So why I'm saying this, because I want this to be understood that how the budget performs. So where Percy get run away with murder, it's where he speaks about how the budget aligns with the minimum threshold of say 5%, 3%, which is within the SADC benchmark. He ran away with murder because it is correct what he's saying. But the issue which is not clear to the public, which I want to clarify, so we don't get stuck to what he's saying, whether this can mislead us, that things are okay. Things are not okay. The issue is on how the budget is utilized, how the funds are disbursed, who is getting the money. And I want to go back to the issues of procurement system of government. And the Minister of Finance himself recognized this in his midterm review. If you look at the midterm review, he spoke about establishing value for money unit, whose role and the mandate will be to clean up the procurement mess. So the message is that in line with that observation, let me qualify why he's proposing to set up that unit and why is it a problem. The problem is that when the government is disbursing money, they are disbursing money, people are making money in town by just getting into government procurement. People who are active on the black market are not the youth people who are in the informal sector. Those ones are small boys. You know the numbers. People who are behaving there are these ones which are getting contracting work with the government, and they go and they buy inputs for agriculture. Now look, just imagine about the $224 billion for agriculture alone. And it's going to go to few players who are concentrated. The first thing is the challenge is that the suppliers to government are concentrated, there are very few.
But government has brought a solution to that, isn't it? It said that it is going to be looking at how those who get contracts with government are using their money and how they are...
Correct. So the message to government is that there must be political will to deal with those people. Because, for example, I want to ask you a question, Sarah.
I ask the questions here.
Yeah. Okay. let's go back. Let me ask and answer it myself. That Minister of Finance pays for a service provider who is Mugano Private Limited, who is going to be supplying dairy products. But I don't have a company which is into manufacturing of dairy products. And they know that. So how do you think their statutory instrument or their provisions they made or the announcement, the measures to say you must not go to the black market? They are now putting the burden on the financial intelligence unit to check who is going to the black market. But in the first instance, you have already approved my quotations at a rate which is forward rate. And even in the Minister of Finance midterm review, is recognizing that they want to come up with a frame of forward rate. Why do you want to come up with a frame of forward rate if it is a problem? It means you are accepting it in the first instance. Are you with me? And then you allow me to charge you a rate which is above the official rate, which is above the parallel market rate, which is accepted by the market, and you take a forward of 1.5. Then you say, when the money now gets into my account and you have paid it. If you go to a shop yourself, as a person, don't you see that this rate used on this commodity is more than the black market rate which I know? And there are instances where you make a decision to pay with the US dollars, because you know if I pay with the Zim dollar, I will lose my RTGS here. because you can see the rate is not correct. As a person without any degree in economics.
But we are dealing with this as a country with the gold coins.
No, but that's one. Let me, if you can give me 1 minute to finish this one, then I deal with the gold coins. So the point I am saying that as long as government is not cleaning up its procurement system, and I would want to argue what my colleagues say, it is much as I recognize that our challenges are structural, there's no debate about it. But there are short-term things which we can do, which can kind of stabilize the issues. If there is government, first and foremost, remove distortions on parallel markets. Now we have 3 distortions, and I'll come to gold. We have distortions in the auction system, where you can get money at a lower rate, and you can change it, and you can go to black market and come back again. If you remove that distortions, you are taking away the madness which we are seeing. Then you have a distortion on the gold coins, where you can buy gold at a rate of 448, I don't know where it is now. Now, the first thing to do is to go and change your RTGS, your US dollar, into gold, into RTGS. And 1,000 US dollars will buy you gold, which is equal to 1.8, 1.9 US dollars equivalent. And you hold on it, right? Then you change it again. So as long as, so okay, we have to have one exchange, we have to liberalize the exchange rate. Then the second issue, government must not be involved in the agricultural command programs. They must allow value chain players, actors to finance production of those commodities. And government finance in agriculture concentrate on market failures, which is the areas of roads, dams, and even small order farmers. Not large scale farmers helped by government. When millers, big companies are there which can finance this through contract farming. And the commodity exchange now plays the role of what? Of being the market and also the financing mechanism for these grains. Now you don't then have to put that $224 billion to people who are going to be using it to squander it on the black market. So that is the one thing which must be done. It's a short term again. The third one is to clean up the procurement systems where you have value for money. What are we talking about? We are talking about there should be competitive bids which should come. If it is road construction, you can't have a road where you are doing 20 kilometers and in Ghana just come with one quotation and give you an invoice and you are paying. You must have competitive bids. And you should also ask yourself, does it make sense to do a road from here to Bete Bridge and you cut it in 20 kilometers? Is it efficient? Is it an efficient way of doing things? Or you might want to extend because quality and all those things comes into play. So we are messing ourselves up. And I do not want to look at structural issues. These are real issues which are happening today. And if you hear the figures which are coming out now, we are told that a road will cost 1 million per kilometer. But when you hear the numbers coming through, it might cost us more than 2 million to do 1 kilometer. So those things does not require a long term or does not require reforms. But now coming to gold, I'm sure when he's going to be responding, he can tell us what is their target, how much money do they want to move out. But what I find difficult is that does this country have enough amount of gold to give to people, to still raise money, to take out excess money? Now I've told you that this budget, this new revised budget, $1.2 trillion is going to be given to service providers. Do we have enough gold to combat that? Even if you are going to be combating $400 billion, which we are hearing as hearsay, how many tons of gold do they want to produce to combat that? So we are not going to be exporting gold, and we are circulating gold in this country. What is going to happen in foreign currency? I'm starting a new debate which is outside the normal arbitrage issue which people are talking about. So we are going to affect, also have some obligation to pay, some debts to pay. So if we circulate this gold, what are we going to do with our obligations? We hear that some of the gold has been used as security for debt. So the competing interests are so much, to the extent that I'm convinced that central bank don't have enough amount of gold coins to mop out excess money. Because, for example, the first one which was issued out, 2,000 gold coins, it's $1.6 billion. So what do you think $1.6 billion will do? We make noise about 1.6 billion RTGS, which is being mopped out by 2,000 coins. Will do to this whole nonsense of procurement system where someone comes in with a rate of 1.8, and we are sitting here and say gold coins are going to do miracles. To do what miracles?
Maybe you could want to come in around the gold coins in terms of the stabilization of prices, in terms of the stabilization of the rate. How feasible is it? And really, what is the target that has to be mopped out?
Thank you. I think the first thing to understand is the gold coin is not, the objective is not solely to mop up liquidity, though it is one of the key objectives. There are other objectives beyond mopping up liquidity, such as value preservation, such as confidence building in the economy. So all those are other objectives for the gold coins. But what we have also observed is it is also not the only instrument at the central bank's disposal or the ministry's disposal to deal with volatilities or instability in the economy today. The recent monetary policy committee measures that were announced were primarily to deal with stability and include the hike in the interest rate as one of the key measures that was taken by the monetary policy committee. But you would also note that the ministry play a key role, the Ministry of Finance and other government departments and entities, in supporting the efforts by Reserve Bank to achieve a tight monetary policy situation. That is why it is unsurprising in the budget, as he is indicating. The ministry has indicated that they've already come up with or revised the procurement system of government to make sure that it doesn't negate against the whole idea or the motive of Reserve Bank to achieve a tight monetary situation. So I'm just trying to explain that the whole idea of gold coins is not limited to mopping up liquidity. The interest rate policy is actually working very well. And in actual fact, it appears to me now the people are attributing all the progress that has been made on stability so far to the gold coins. Yet we know that the interest rate policy could be one of the key drivers of the stability we are seeing today. Why am I saying this? The Reserve Bank has only issued 1,500 gold coins and 2,000 gold coins to make a total of 3,000 gold coins. If you put that in currency, it's about how much? 18 million or so against the liquidity that we have in the economy. But what was operating in the background is the reality of a tight monetary policy situation.
But I want to really understand when you say that there is stability. Just yesterday, Zinara increased targets from around 700 to 860. The price of bread continues to go up. What stability are you talking about vis-a-vis the spending power of people, say civil servants right now?
The alternative or the open market rate is starting to strengthen now. So you have seen the Zimbabwean dollar, which had peaked at 1:800 or above, going down to 1:700 in terms of the rate, and even below 1:650. And we are seeing that trend.
But the bank rate is continuing up.
Yes, and which is good towards convergence. It's going up towards convergence. We think that the optimum exchange rate is somewhere in between the alternative exchange rate and the interbank rate. So the alternative exchange rate is strengthening towards the interbank rate, and this one is softening. So we because of that development, we expect some measure of convergence between those two rates. If convergence happens, then we have essentially gotten to a point of stability. We may not get to convergence, but we may get to a point of equilibrium between the two rates. The equilibrium can be achieved at, say, 1:500 for another rate and 1:550 for the other rate. As long as they are stable at that rate, then we have gotten to a point of stability as an economy. But the main message, the key message that I'm trying to drive out is that there's been a cocktail of measures that were taken by the ministry, by the Reserve Bank and the ministry. And I was just kidding with the ministry to say, do you know we have got such much power to influence the direction of the economy? After the measures they have taken, including the ones that you have indicated about interventions on procurement, which itself is also a reflection of a structural challenge that we are unable to access international capital as an economy. In a normal economy, those would have been funded through appropriate funding structures, but those are not available to Zimbabwe today because of the circumstances, the situation we find ourselves in. So because of that unique situation Zimbabwe finds itself in, there need to be judicious management of our resources and our situation as a country. So Prof could be right to say some of the issues we're seeing today, they relate to some the need to increase our management of the situation on the ground. And I think we must debate more and more about how the situation can be managed given the structural challenges we face, but within those structural challenges, we just need to manage. Hence the interventions such as the gold coins, which are essentially important to deal with the volatility or the velocity of the Zimbabwean dollar, which is one point indicated, but also importantly to preserve value. Hence the issue of the review of the procurement process by the ministry, which actually reflects his concern about that being a driver of the instability in the economy. So yes, there are some things that the ministry have done quite well, but there's also still room for improvement.
If I was to argue, Professor, that what we would call the stability that we are seeing on the exchange rate does not reflect on the pricing models of this country. And if I was to further argue that most people have actually abandoned the use of the RTGS and now they have no appetite to even change it to local currency. They're just buying and selling to each other in the USD. This is why there appears that there might be this stability. It has nothing to do with policy. What would you say?
The starting point is that there's nothing called stability in this country. I think let's be very clear and be very honest to each other. I went to school, I did economics. I know what is stability and what is instability. So we are facing serious instability. And one of the major examples why we don't have stability in this country is that for the first time, the Minister of Finance could not hide his tricks, what he normally do every year, where he says, I have no supplemental budget, and he spent behind the scenes. And he spent almost like a double of what he had already budgeted for. This time around, he had to double the budget in the public first. Do you say stability when the budget has been doubled in 6 months? We can't call it a supplementary budget, in my view. This should be kind of a new budget. Because when you're supplementing, it should be a small amount of money which you are adding to the existing budget. It's double. So there's no stability to talk about. Inflation is 256.9%, and they call that stability. Money supply in the banking system now is short to almost $1 trillion from $10 billion last 4 years, and you call that stability. What is stable here? There's nothing which you can call stability, which can qualify for stability. We are in a chaotic situation. The rates which is speaking about, which are going up and down, is fluctuation of the rates because of the shocks which happens at intervals. And how do the shocks happen? The shocks happens when farmers are delivering, say, maize, they get paid by government, they go on the black market to buy money. Cotton season started sometime in June, they were getting money, the rate was running away. Government was paying for service providers a lot of money, and they don't pay every week. So when they pay, that's why the rate goes to 1,000, right, to 900, because there's too much liquidity in the market. Right now, if you talk to people, there's some kind of tight liquidity because government is not paying. Now, wait and see now. We are getting into agricultural season. We now have double households to be supported. We now have a double budget for the Ministry of Agriculture. They're going to be paying for those service providers to supply inputs. Remember, there's the Russia-Ukraine war. The price of fertilizer has gone up by 100%, all right? And the same applies to food, things like that, fuel. So there's even external factors are against us. Where I think there's a solution for Zimbabweans, I still want to reaffirm the issues of cleaning the procurement. It will not be the silver bullet, but in a way it will restrain the madness of the rate, the exchange rate. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not here by any way not recognizing or acknowledging what the Minister of Finance have done. In fact, they've listened to us. We should give them kudos for doing that, for setting up the value for money unit. But for me, my major concerns, and if we come back here 3 months down the line, I will be right, it rests on the lack of political will. Because there are very few players who are in this supply system of government, whom you see in road construction, you see the same company in dam construction. So my major concern is on the value for money unit is political will. My major concern is centers around the fact that we have very few companies which are involved in government service provision, some kind of an oligopoly, very few. They also carry political clout to the extent that whatever work which is done in that value for money unit, if there's no political will from the highest office on earth, it will come to nothing and will continue to have madness. Remember, this is money.
Amazing. So I want us to get to the point where we're just about to close. So I want us to try. I know this might be very difficult for you, but I just want you to try and reduce this. What is the direct benefit of this supplementary budget and the midterm statement by the Minister of Finance to me?
The supplementary budget looked at the welfare of the government employee and increased the budget towards employment cost by 53%. That is in recognition of the reality of escalating inflation that confronts the ordinary person in the economy. In terms of benefit, we expect that, coupled with stability, an increase in the Zimbabwean dollar remuneration would go a long way in supporting the civil servant. The amount may not seem sufficient to cater for the needs, the increasing needs today. But what is more important is to balance the increases with the potential inflation coming out of those increases. So we are in a balancing act situation. That's why I said the issues that confront us today, yes, they are structural, but they also need some measure of management. So I think a decision would have been taken to increase the employment cost to that level. So that's the benefit. But the biggest benefit and gift a government can deliver to its citizens is a stable environment. So if the budget can deliver this stable environment, I think we are all positively impacted in terms of our warfare. So the biggest issue that should be concentrated on by both Treasury and the central bank, because if you look at the measures coming from the ministry, they are also being complemented by the measures coming from the Monetary Policy Committee and the Reserve Bank. So which means that stability, I think, could be at the primary objective of the country today.
Thank you. But what is the direct benefit to me?
It means nothing to you, this budget. Why? Because one, he is speaking about 53% increase in budget provision for civil servants. You've seen that civil servants has been given 100% salary adjustment, and the lowest paid civil servant is earning $35,000. I have explained to you the economics. It buys nothing. The $175 US will go for handouts. The $35,000 will be between you and your grave. Right? The second aspect is that the tax-free threshold given by the Minister of Finance was very stingy. How do you give a tax-free threshold of 50,000 RTGS when the poverty data line or the consumer basket for family of 5 is $140,000? It's a clear testimony of where the kind of cost of living is. So you can't then give that kind of a threshold of 50,000. You should move to the level of poverty data line, right? Then also to say that it would have meant something meaningful to you and me if he had given more provision to US dollar salaries, raised the $75, maybe even to $300 to kind of blend, because if wherever you go in the market with dollarized, there's no question about that. Wherever you go. So you can't give someone a salary of 35,000 RTGS when you're dollarized, right? Then the other point again, it means nothing to me because my health matters. I've told you that the utilization of the budget on health was 27% by mid-year. There was no significant supplemental budget for the health sector. There was more money to tenderpreneurship where the money is. So it means we are going to have a luta continua of the rate running away. His point is valid as far as the biggest benefit is stability. But there's not going to be any stability because there's $1.2 trillion within the budget, which is for the tenderpreneurship. And these guys will be getting the money to buy foreign currency, and the rate will run away. So we are going to be in a serious poverty. We are going to be continuously suffering. Something called stability, never. Look at 3.5 million households who are being added, 1.7 added to the existing 1.5 million households. It tells you where we are going. We are in an election mode. The government is campaigning. They'll be using the budget. And don't forget the contractors. They also get quite a hefty adjustment of over 100%. So we're in for a ride. The outlook is gloomy. So you should tighten the belt.
So now we are going to just turn to the ordinary person on the street and ask them, what is the benefit that you see? What have you benefited from this statement and what you understand? And these are their voices. This is what they think. This is how they feel about the budget statement that was delivered by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Mthuli.
I've got nothing to understand and I've got nothing to listen to.
Yeah, pane mamwe andinoti nzwisise zviri nani. Tingangoti wa Mthuli munhu anogona ngari kutoti rware nepfungwa mbijani. Andidika because tingati one, most of the things zvavari kuita vari kuzviti ni RTGS. Izvo kuenda kuma government offices kwachona cheko everything is being paid in USD anditi washa massive servants ari kupiwa 30,000 RTGS anditi that 30,000 kwanda kanotenga grocery water yapedzi naro mwedzi pamba ari kuda transport ari kuda kuita sei anditi saka in a short tingakoti Mthuli nywe munhu we triple C. Why ndiri kuti ndiwe triple C? this team ripera na ID ndo wakavharisa mabhengi aMthuli Ncube. Later on umuntu uye uite minister. Aroda mborikavha umbokuitire utsinye sezvamakangomuitirawo before. On the other side ari kusafisa vamwe vanhu. On the other side ari right ari kuita vanhu vavhurike brain.
Budget, it does make sense to those who have got money, not a normal person in the street.
Budget akataura na Mthuli hapanjanonzwise nezvaro. That's number 1. 2, Mthuli wacho Ncube wacho hatikwanise kumuteerera because Mthuli Ncube akaiswa na leader asiri proper. That's number 1. 3, so that's number 2. Kana achinge achibudisa budget Mthuli Ncube, budget rake harienderani nemarandi anozoita economics dzake. Saka already zvinhu zvake zvese zviri biased. Mapanzwisisa. Saka about budget so far hakuna budget ratirabuda. Because budget rake anoita budget ina RTGS, of which you don't use RTGS chete munomu, you use also US dollars. So budget rake ri biased. Anobusa budget ri US dollar, ri budget ri kwa RTGS. Zekunza anoti aisa increase salaries ne 25% RTGS, of which that 25% RTGS is nothing to civil servants. Aishande chino. Yes, checks. Saka hapana zvatikutaura nezva about the budget. So far tiri pa0.
Zvebudget rakataurwa last week ka. Kutaura chokwadi isati tomboziva akataura riniko. Because takungoziva kuti hapana zvaanotaura because hapana. Saka zvokuti akataura tomboziva akataura rini. Because yena vanhu vachati atichambozviteereri because chokutaura chacho anotaura kuti kudiko hapana. Ndo chokwadi hapana.
I'm benefiting nothing. I benefit nothing from that thing.
Isusu inototiomesera. Because isusu, as you can see, I'm a vendor. Kuti nindiwane mari massive servants anofanira kunge nechi ane mari. Saka kana achipiwa 30,000 RTGS achawere uzondipromote kuno. Apa isina.
An ordinary person, it won't change. For those with money, maybe.
Chekutanga hatingatanga kutaura pakuti budget yaiko zvinezvi. Toda kutanga tatasa zviri kumashure. Mapanzwisa. Chekutanga chavafanira kutanga vakaita kutanga wambotanga vatidzidzisa about that ka gold kaokaya. Kuti gold coin nacho chawanikwa navanhu vakaita sei. Number 2, wotuza kuti RTGS rauramba vachikwira rate richasvika parini richiramba chikwira rate kana kuti richapera rini musystem. Uyezve tichiri kushandisa US dollar here kana kuti hatichishandisa US dollar. Mapanzwisa. They have to be frank to us because isusu tisu ma-citizens. Kana vachiritenderera hapana chatiri kuita isusu. Mapanzwisisa. Vamwe vanotibudira clear kuti RTGS rauri kuwedzera kukwira kwerate here ndo wakwidza rate here because vakakwedzera masalaries neRTGS which means rate vakwidza rate. Mapanzwisisa. So they have to become clear kwatiri kwete kutitenderera. Uyezve votitaurira kuti gold coin rawati gold coin how effective kwariri isusu kuindustry muno because already vakati vari kubudisa gold coin racho kutengera pa 1 point something US dollars, of which isusu ordinary citizens who can't afford that money. How are we going to run the industry or economy? Tichishandisa those 3 currencies, gold, US dollar, RTGS. Mapanzwisisa. Zvese aifanira zvibuda pachena before asati abudisa budget. Ozotaura budget redu takuita zvakati. Or else the other things aifanira kuita, Mthuli Ncube aifanira kuuya kana asingagone chikoro. Aifanira kuuya kuma citizens, obvunza ma citizens kuti wakomana chinhu chamhanya zvakaita sei. Bondi rashanda zvakaita sei munyika. Vanhu vomuudza kuti bondi raifekta pakati nepakati. Saka toita sei owana solution kubva futi kuti kuma citizens because already Mthuli Ncube pachake idhanda head.
The budget should be people oriented, centered on the people. But the problem is budget from Zimbabwe burungoriziva. It's centered on the elite, not the poor. Harisi redu area. Derao.
We don't trust Mthuli Ncube. Reason yasingatrustira Mthuli Ncube ndeyekuti munhu akamisa Mthuli Ncube kuti ave minister nhasi. Munhu wacho itsotsi. Dai Mthuli Ncube akaiswa nemunhu ari trustworthy. Dai tine trust muna Mthuli Ncube, but Mthuli Ncube akaiswa nemunhu ari asiri trustworthy. Saka we don't trust munhu aiswa nembavha kuti atungamire futi isusu. Because imbavha dzaisana pa position. So we don't trust matsotsi. Igame rematsotsi.
Initially we had trust in him, but now bookish economics in Zimbabwe doesn't work anymore.
Mthuli Ncube ine hangu personally I trust him 100%, but the problem it's political. that many ane knowledge yokuseva this is Zimbabwe, but problem iripo manje pana Mthuli Ncube is just a stooge. Economy dziri kuranywa kusekisheki tozviziva uko. Kuna na anzani aimbova minister of finance ndoko zvinobva andoudzwa zvokuita. Iye anenge achiziva kuti tofana kuita 1 2 3 anozviziva, but manje hazviapprove zvotonga zvanoapproviwa nomumwe munhu. Kana kanzi no haana zvaangaita, muregererewo murume uya ari panguva yakaoma.
Now, thank you very much for joining us here on this, the Free Talk, with me, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, and I had amazing guests in the studio who were talking economy, and we're just trying to bring it back to the people, what you understand, and not, the fancy words that come out of the economic books, so that you guys scare us from reading numbers. Thank you very much for trying and simplify and explaining the budget and unpacking it to the people of Zimbabwe, because this is the Free Talk. This is the alternative platform. This is the place where we hear everyone's view and where we all should speak so that we build this nation together, because this is our Zimbabwe too. Now, until next time, thank you very much for joining us here on this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation and Heart and Soul TV and Radio. I'm your host as usual, Dara B. Until next time.